So my name is Jonathan Romney, and I'm very happy to be here today talking to Juliano Dornelles and Kleber Mendonça Filho, the directors
I,
of Bacurau. Bacurau is an extraordinary film from Brazil. It's a sort of dystopian story. It's a science fiction story. It's a picture of Brazil now, or perhaps a picture of Brazil in the future. It's many things, and it's certainly one of the most playful and provocative films we've seen from Brazil in quite a while, from a country which often produces very provocative cinema. Juliano, Kleber, the two of you have worked together for, I guess, something like 18 years now. Juliano, you have a career as a production designer, and I know you've worked together on a short before as directors. How did you decide to direct a feature together, and how did this become your first joint venture?
It wasn't a decision to direct a film together. It wasn't like that. We were at a film festival. We were very happy with the response from the audience for the short film Cold Tropics that Kleber directed, and I helped him. It was a very small crew, me, Kleber, and Emily, and we did it for 3 years approximately.
a
And
short
we
film
were,
made during
yeah,
3 years. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And we were very happy. We love genre cinema, and Cold Tropics is like a mockumentary. It's a kind of a science fiction too, and we were discussing the lack of genre cinema in Brazil, and how would be nice to have more films like that. And at the same film festival in Brasilia, we also saw a lot of real documentaries about people that live in isolated areas, people in the countryside, and they were portraying people in a way that we don't agree very much, in a very patronizing way, maybe. And we just got a little mad about that. And the problem is, some of those films were actually good, and this is a real problem because it makes the thing more difficult and complex. So, and then these two things that we were talking: genre cinema, horror films, westerns, and at the same time, this problem of representation that we have in Brazil from in the media, in the telenovelas, and also in the cinema. And we came up with this sparkle of idea to make Bacurau. And this was 10 years ago. And world has changed a lot, and also the ideas evolved a lot. And the first draft of the script is very different from what we have now as a film. And yes, maybe Kleber can complement something.
No, it's just interesting to hear you remember what happened, because right from the start we were discussing these ideas, and it was never we never really planned to make the film together and to co-direct the film. We never really discussed this, but we were
Yeah.
just going for it, and I think there was a lot of respecting each other's space, and this is what still happens. Even during the recording of this interview, I think we were always discussing the ideas together. Sometimes I would begin a sentence and Juliana would end, and that's how we got excited about making the film, and that's how it evolved. And it was never questioned who would actually direct the film. We just thought that it would be natural for us to make the film together, and this is what we did.
Yeah. So Kleber, this is people were surprised by this film because your last two films, Neighbouring Sounds and Aquarius, they're urban films. They gave a very different view of the Brazilian city, set in Recife, your own city in northeastern Brazil, which is where you are both talking from today. Bacurau is set in the same region in the state of Pernambuco, but it's a completely different world.
Mm-hmm. I was a film critic myself for a number of years, and I remember myself trying to look at the work of directors I liked and trying to understand a certain order of things in terms of what he or she was trying to do. And for me, now that I'm making my own films, it's always very interesting because you keep looking at people's reactions to what you do. And I remember back in the 90s, I was known as a video maker, particularly in the Recife film scene. And I was known as a video maker because I hadn't done any films on celluloid, on 16 millimeter or 35 millimeter. And then I made my first, let's say, narrative short film, which was a horror film. And then I did another film which would be described as a scary film, scary movie, a 6-minute short. And then I did the third one, which was an adaptation of a Russian fairy tale, which was also described as horror. So I was the horror movie guy. And then when I did my fourth film, people were very surprised because it was actually set in a flat with this mother of two, and she's not really doing much. Now it's social realism. So people, it's interesting to try and follow the way people try to understand what you do. And then, of course, I did 3 or 4 other short films, which kept people guessing what my next film would be. And then, of course, when you do your feature films, you get a whole new level of attention. So Neighbouring Sounds I think it's a very successful film. It even played very well internationally. And then it leads to Aquarius. And then now I get a very fair question from you, which I completely understand, about Bacurau, because, of course, there's a change in the way the film feels, I suppose. But it's interesting because in many aspects, I think Bacurau feels a lot like Neighbouring Sounds. Particularly the way it was always a challenge to keep all the characters running at the same time. And that's a very tough challenge for a script and for the film and for the actors, because everybody has to be great and interesting and has to be remembered, even if it's just a kid who says 4 words in the whole film. Everybody remembers him. I'm just trying to explain how sometimes the filmmaker is in a dimension, and then the observers are in another dimension, but somehow they meet in the end.
Indeed. Well, I do want to ask you about your cast in a while, but could you explain the world the film is set in? It's set in this particular region in the northeast. It's an area known as the Sertão, which is sometimes considered, the outback of Brazil. What is this world like, and how is it perceived in general in the rest of Brazil?
Well, the Sertão is maybe the most neglected region of Brazil. All the governments through the years had some difficulties to look with attention to that region, and the money never goes there, and there's this real problem with water, lack of water, that could be not easily, but that could be solved with a lot of work. But and we had this for centuries, and it's still a problem. We live in the seaside, we live in the coast, but it's our state and our region. So we are not from there, but we know that region very well because it's a very rich region in terms of culture and in terms of literature and arts and musician, poets, and we have many friends and people that come from that area to live in the big city. So it's a presence, a real presence, a very strong presence in our lives since we were kids. And we have this very strong tradition of films that represent the Sertão in a very similar way, and we never wanted to do like that. We see things. It's the more or less the same situation about the community and the people. And we saw that opportunity to make a film with the Sertão green, the green Sertão. It was raining at that time. It's not a usual thing that happens, but there was rain, and we felt lucky because it increased this idea of this artificial man-made problem with the water distribution. The thing is, we needed to have this place, this isolated place, this isolated community. And when we think about our system, our universe, where we live, these isolated areas we can find only in the Sertão. Yeah. And that was a natural choice to make the film there.
There's something that I could tell you, which I think it says a lot about the way the Sertão is shown and represented in Brazilian cinema and Brazilian television. Sometimes there is a big project about to shoot in some location in the Sertão, and then they get rain, and everything goes green in 3 or 4 days, and they cancel the shoot because it doesn't really fit the image, the classic image of the Sertão, which is dry and poor and basically, when you shoot that whole dry landscape, it says a lot about the way Brazil looks at that particular region. And then, of course, when we got rain, we saw the whole phenomenon taking place around us, and we thought, this is great. This is going to be amazing to show the Sertão just like that. And of course, we got a lot of reactions from a lot of people in the south of Brazil about how green it looked, because it's just not the way that it should look.
Right. And the community of Bacurau itself, you've invented this kind of larger than life community. It feels realistic, but maybe not that realistic, because there are some very large characters in this world, and it's a kind of diverse community with these almost mythic figures belonging to it.
I think the whole thing about myth is, it really comes from not only literature and music and all the stories that you keep hearing throughout your life about the Sertão, but it actually comes from reality. We made this film deep into the Sertão region at the Rio Grande do Norte state, which is about 600 kilometers from Recife. And we were lucky because, we allowed ourselves to have a lot of time to find great people to work on the film, to identify all those incredible faces. But the beautiful thing is that they're not just faces. With each face comes a fascinating character, and we just had the most beautiful experience. I've been very lucky with my films. I normally have, up to now, I've had great experiences making the films. With Bacurau, of course, it was special because we went to this region, and the film was a magnet for just the right people. And then we worked with them for 3 months, and just before we were beginning to come to the end of the production, Renato Roberta, the person responsible for dealing with all the actors that in other films would be called extras, she said that actually what happened is that the film was indeed a magnet to attract all those people, but they were in fact all the outcasts from the region, from the different communities. They were, homosexuals and trans people and poets and artists and clowns and and even the ones described as crazy people. So these are the ones who came to work with us, and they were the most amazing people. And this was incredibly moving to realize this after the whole experience we had making Bacurau.
One thing that we need to remember, Kleber, is when we wrote the script, we had this idea to write a script like an adventure film, and we wanted to use some archetypical characters and to compose that community mixed with our idea of a healthy and loving community inspired by our own community, our own bubble, let's say like that. But this mythical thing about it, it kind of, it was after we started to research, after we started to travel to find a place to shoot, we made a lot of discoveries about real characters that live in many places that we didn't shoot there, but we met a lot of people, and those people are so similar to our characters of our script. You know, we met that black matriarch as a teacher. We met a woman like Carmelita, and we met many others people that we could relate to our characters. So
We
it's
found
mythical.
little museums.
Yeah, we found little museums.
Like the one in the film.
Exactly. Yeah.
More and less sophisticated than the one in the film.
So there's something about the sertão. The sertão is mythical, really mythical, and we just follow the instructions that we had in our life, and then we got this confirmation, and I think this is beautiful.
Yeah,
we found this location, which was I think it was number 3 candidate for to shoot Bacurau, although I think in the end it would never work out because it was far away from a logistical, it would be a logistical problem. But we did find this place which we fell in love with, and this place had a square, and in the middle of the square there was a bust, one of these very public monuments. And we came closer to have a look at this bust, and it was the bust of a woman, and she was a teacher. This is exactly the kind of thing we wrote in the script, and we got a confirmation from reality. Beautiful. Not a man, not a businessman, a woman, a teacher.
It's a very surprising film because it starts off as this rural drama. It feels quite realistic with a kind of mythic element, and then it goes in a completely different direction. You bring in elements of science fiction, you bring in elements of thriller, the Western, and this theme of human hunting, and it becomes something completely different.
I think we actually talked about this. We wanted to set a trap, especially if you think in terms of Brazilian cinema. And as I said earlier, when I made my short films, that was 20 years ago. And I made 3 short films, which would be described as genre films and horror films and scary movies. And I got a lot of terrible reactions, particularly from the classic older observers of Brazilian cinema, critics and even academics. It's just because Brazilian cinema didn't really go there historically, and Brazilian cinema was more focused on social realism. Of course, Coffin Joe is a genius. Me and Juliano, we love him, and he was never given the credit I think we think he deserves. So I
think Coffin Joe is the kind of the ghoul figure in
Coffin Joe, but a great filmmaker also. He made some of the most memorable nightmares ever put on film. And I think with Bacurau we set a trap. I mean, the film begins it begins with the coffins, which is interesting enough, but then it just goes into this social realism, you know, life in the community, and then slowly we you know, the little elements are put in place, and then suddenly, just like on Scooby-Doo, you know, somebody just removes the mask and says, "Ha! This is what we are. This is the film that you're watching." We are going full genre now, and by the time that happens, hopefully you're invested and you're interested in what is going on. I think we did discuss this, and I find it amusing. It's always very amusing to see the reaction the film got in Brazil, not only abroad, but in Brazil particularly.
How did people perceive it in Brazil? Because I wonder whether people saw it as, you know, a political parable or a kind of protest film, which is how it certainly comes across in some ways.
The film is now a cultural phenomenon in Brazil. People went crazy with the film, and of course, there's this resistance and kind of libertarian and these kind of things. People from the left wing are more related to, but I think that the film just crossed the border of the, you know, people from the left and had been discovered by a lot of people, different people and more conservative people, and the film seems to work with many different audiences. We made in the cinemas we made 800,000 admissions, which is a very big box office for a art house film, national Brazilian art house film. People are still talking about the film, and we released the film in August in 2019. And people still are still finding similarities with the reality, and I think that the element about history, Brazilian history, is it's on the film, and people talk a lot about predicting the future, because a lot of things that are in the movie in Bacurau started to happen after Bolsonaro's government, especially, but even before that. So I don't know. I think it's a film about Brazilian history, but addressing to the future, and this kind of made people very interested in discuss, and of course it's a a film of heroes, and people are not usually see themselves as the heroes, especially against Americans or Europeans, or because we are very colonized by the American cinema. And this is another element very important, because it kind of made people feel proud of having such a I don't know, so rich in terms of visuals and very how can I say, commercial like film. It's a genre film from Brazil, and it works very well. I think it's something that we will discuss a lot in the future yet, because it's not over. Actually, people are still talking about it.
This is one of the interesting things, that you have these villains in the film who are American, who are these kind of exploitative tourists who arrive to sort of shoot people on their personal safari. But at the same time, you're using a lot of American cinema.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Your weapon, you're using elements of Apocalypse
It's
Now.
not an anti-American film. It's a film that we made with a lot of love for the American cinema, and some of the aspects of the American culture. But USA and Brazil, both countries are ugly and beautiful at the same time. So, but the main thing is people are not used to see something like that. And now we saw the invasion of the Capitol with people dressed just like our characters. This is crazy. And people start to talk about the film again. Here and there. It's crazy.
Yeah, we got a lot of mentions on Twitter on Bacurau after the whole incident at the Capitol. And just yesterday, another meme in Brazil with the "you want to live or die" line about vaccination, because of course there's a lot of people who are questioning.
With Damiano holding a syringe.
Yeah, Damian is now holding a syringe. So the film is always being discussed, and it's crazy. I mean, when your neighbor, next door neighbor, begins to quote lines from the film on the lift, it's you begin to realize that
people are making tattoos. People are making tattoos of the film. I never saw something like that, especially with a Brazilian film. This is completely new for me.
There are a lot of genres in this film, science fiction and thriller, but there's also a lot of Western. But in fact, there is a tradition of Brazilian Western or films that are like Westerns. And can you tell me about the tradition of the cangaço and what it means in Brazilian cinema and what it means in your film?
Well, first of all, cangaço took place no more than 400 kilometers away from where we are now. It's really part of our history. And it happened 90 years ago. So it's still very fresh, and the stories are incredibly strong and violent, of course, and fascinating because of that. So that's history. And I have, in fact, I don't know if Juliano has visited the actual location, but I have visited the place where Lampião and his
I was there.
And his group, where they were finally massacred and beheaded
and exposed.
Yeah, well, it was actually a traveling circus all around the sertão with the heads.
Can we just explain the cangaço? These were sort of rebel bandit figures, is that right?
Yeah, it's like Robin Hood people.
Yeah.
We have this kind of group in many different cultures, and it's very similar to Robin Hood because there are the government that hates and painted the cangaceiros as criminals and etc. But a lot of common people just thought they were heroes, and that's it.
And the authorities had a incredibly violent approach to them, and they were vicious in fighting the cangaceiros. So that's history, and it's fascinating. And you can see museums which carry all the different elements from the cangaço. And then, of course, in the 60s with Cinema Novo. Well, in the 50s with the Cangaceiro, which I think screened in Cannes, 1953. That became an international success, and it established Brazilian cinema with this subgenre of the cangaço cinema. And of course, when you look at Glauber Rocha and you go back to Nelson Pereira dos Santos and Roberto Santos, I think they inform you as a Brazilian filmmaker where you can go. And then, of course, when you add Sergio Corbucci, Sergio Leone, and John Ford, and Peckinpah, and then you bring in Carpenter and all the films that have made you want to make films throughout your life, that's what you end up with. And I'm fascinated by people's reactions, Brazilians and non-Brazilians. They really pick up on what it's not like what we were trying to do, because everything came very naturally. I mean, just today I was thinking, I don't know why, for the first time and I don't think I've ever talked to Julian about this, but the whole the scene with Sonia Braga in the funeral, where she's saying the worst things about her friend who died. I really remember Glauber Rocha's short film D, which is this very loving homage to a friend who had died, and the film takes place in Di Cavalcante's funeral. So, you know, the references, they come uninvited, and they just say, "I'm here to help you," and that's how it happens. It's very natural flow.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the actors, because you have a lot of non-professional actors in the film, but you have a number of very well-known figures. And Sonia Braga has this absolutely legendary status in Brazilian film and TV. And she was previously in Aquarius, playing a very different role, maybe, you know, incarnating Brazilian women in a way. And here she is, you know, the great rural matriarch.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was really into provoking a completely different kind of performance from Sonia. Again, you play with expectations. I had made Aquarius with Sonia, and it was a good experience. And now, of course, when we announced that she would be in Bacurau, I think a lot of people thought Aquarius too. And of course, it was a very different film, a very different character. And I really like that. I really like that she has an unusual way of showing love. She's very tough. And the first scene we see with her is something out of an Italian film from the 50s or 60s. And she has the worst, the foulest mouth. And she's talking about somebody who's dead now, and it's the person's funeral. And I think it's a good scene. And then, of course, we develop her character a little bit more, and you realize she now has become the matriarch in that community. And then, of course, Sonia's presence in the film, she steals scenes, even if it's an ensemble film. So all these challenges, they are great for a filmmaker. How are you going to deal with Sonia Braga in an ensemble now that this is not about her? This is not Aquarius. This is a different film. So shooting in Panavision, putting her in the middle of the frame and surrounded by other people, and yeah, it was a wonderful experience again. And I love Dominguez, the doctor, and I suspect she might not even be a doctor. She might be a very experienced nurse who has been upgraded to doctor status in that community. But that's not in the film. It's just the kind of thing that we talked amongst ourselves.
Yeah. And you also have Barbara Collen, who is in Aquarius as well, who's really establishing herself as a major figure in Brazilian film.
Yes.
When we were shooting Aquarius and we discovered Barbara and we invited her, and I was the production designer of Aquarius, so I was with Kleber, and we were also thinking that Bacurau could be the next film. And when we saw Barbara and we started to discuss, we immediately started to discuss the possibility of working with Barbara again. And probably Teresa's character, it was the first character that we wrote in the script, already thinking about the real face and the person that would interpret the character. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it was Barbara, right, Kleber?
Yeah, it was, and it's a beautiful thing, but it's also dangerous because it's like temp music. You fall in love with the music and with the idea of that face, and then it turns out that he or she can't really make the film for different reasons. But yeah, we had Barbara, and we did something even more dangerous, which was during one of the writing sessions, we actually called her. And this is very dangerous because, you're still 2 or 3 years away from shooting the film. Who knows what's going to happen? But we did call her and said, we really want you to start thinking about making this next film you know nothing about with us whenever we finally make it. So yeah, she has a spectacular face, and she's a great person, an artist. And I also love the way that she brings everyone into the film, and then she keeps popping up here and there, and then she closes the film with her face again.
Right.
For me, it's very clear that we established the Teresa's personality based on Barbara's personality and our experience in having Barbara in our set. And after that, Teresa became more solid and more three-dimensional.
She has a line I actually like very much in the film, because her friend and lover, who used to be a killer, is looking at the severed heads, and he says, "Don't you think Lunga might have gone a little too far?" And then she says, "No," and it comes from her, and I really like that it comes from her.
Then you have Udo Kier, who is someone who, I hate that word iconic, but I guess he really has become iconic.
He is.
Everyone has their own idea of what Udo Kier means in a film. So why did you think of him, of all people?
The best person in the world.
Yeah, but we only found out later that he's one of the best people in the world. Yeah. Well, I think we all love films, and I mean, I think I felt that for the first time, even when I was a critic. I had the opportunity of interviewing people, coming very close to people and talking to them who are part of my life. And now as a filmmaker, I still feel that, and I have the good fortune of actually working with them in one of my films. And that I felt that very strongly with Sonia Braga in Aquarius. And I felt it again with Udo Kier in Bacurau, and it just happened that the character already existed, and I happened to go to Palm Springs for the Palm Springs Film Festival. There was a variety event there, and I just happened to meet him in one of these parties, and I mean, we talked for an hour standing there at the party, and then I sent Juliano a message saying, "Udo Kier for Michael." I just talked to him, and Juliano was. I still remember Juliano's reaction. It was like a dream that might not come true, and then a year later he was shooting with us. So he's part of our lives, and it's amazing to see him in the film when he pushes the door, which is his big entrance in the film. Right, that's Udo Kier right there.
So when your film was first screened in Cannes nearly 2 years ago, it was already a critical period for Brazil and Brazilian cinema, because Bolsonaro had started his assault on Brazilian cultural institutions. And now, you know, things have intensified, and you have the crisis with COVID. What is the morale of Brazilian filmmakers and artists now? And, you know, where do you think the artistic and the cinematic community in Brazil is going to get its strength from?
We are in a pretty bad shape now. The industry, the Brazilian film industry is it's destroyed. The film agency doesn't. It's not working. The many projects that already won the funding on paper are not being funded. So there's a lot of films that needed to be cancelled, and a lot of people without a job, and a lot of people changing their professions, changing their jobs, needing to do something else. It's a tragedy, actually. And Of course, there's Netflix, there's Amazon, and there's HBO, and sometimes one series here or a film there. But it doesn't help everybody because we have 300,000 people that works in film industry in Brazil, and 98% of this infrastructure comes from the government structure. It's destroyed.
You realize how vicious the whole thing is when you understand that for each contract, and there are hundreds of films which have been interrupted now, they've pulled the plug on hundreds of projects. Each film has a lot of paperwork which is actually supposed to keep you safe, both sides safe. You sign a piece of paper and it becomes a contract, and each and every contract is not being fulfilled from the government side. So it really is there is this vicious desire to render the whole film industry completely useless, which makes no sense from the economy side because it's part of the economy. So their hatred for the cultural scene, the cultural culture and artists is so great that they'd rather have people unemployed and lose millions and millions of dollars in the economy than just keep everything working. I think it's a very sad moment, and I keep thinking that we should just concentrate on the fact that in maybe 5, 6, or 7 years it will come back. But right now the whole situation is one of destruction.
Right.
Just about everyone is kind of numb. There's not a lot of reaction, which is also really sad and depressing.
And in the meantime, even given how tough the situation is, what are your own plans? Juliano, I know you've been working on your own feature. What do you have ahead of you for the future, both of you?
I hope to work with Kleber for the rest of my life because I love him and I love his films and I love to be with him. But in this moment, this particular moment, we need to wait and see what's going to happen in Brazil, because there was this idea of making a sequel for Bacurau because of the love that we get from the film until now, and the public demanding for this, and when we went back to Barra, to the village, to screen the film for 3,000 people of the region that came there to see it, and we were at the van going to the location, and we started to see those landscapes, and we felt, oh my God, we need to come back here and make another film, and that's it, and we want to, but we don't know when, but we are already discussing ideas, and I think we have a good possibility to make this happen. But at the same time, I'm talking to people about directing things that wasn't written by me, English-speaking films, because Brazilian projects in Portuguese are impossible now, and that's it. I'm aiming for the near future, but without forgetting about my projects, and that's it.
Can you imagine making the sequel to Bacurau as a TV series? Because I could imagine it being a very expansive series.
I prefer film.
I mean, it's funny because Juliano used the word sequel, and it's funny
it's
because
another film. Sorry,
yeah,
I'm using sequel because my English is bad. It's not specifically
no,
a
your English
sequel.
but when you think about it's all about the desire to develop a different story, but I never really see it as a sequel or as a prequel. It's just a different film.
Yeah.
And I think there are many ideas that we can develop around that community and those characters. But I don't know, we're still discussing it. I took some time because, of course, we all have a lot of time during the pandemic. I've been home for 10 months now, and I'm writing, and it's great to keep myself busy thinking about some other films, and you give yourself time to look at what you wrote, and I think it becomes. I really love the idea of having a script, even if it's still being developed. I like to get the paper, to touch the paper and say, this is a film. And I have 2 scripts I'm writing. I've been writing for the last 10 months, last year.
Right. Well, whether you go back to Bacurau or whether you go somewhere else, I wish you all the best, and I wish Brazil all the best. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Kleber,
thank you, Jonathan.
all the best. Goodbye.
It's been a pleasure.
It's a pleasure.
Bye.